Today's News Talk, TNT Radio.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to this live broadcast. We're still in hour number one. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. Thank you for rejoining us right now. We're going to shift gears. I'm going to do a hard pivot over to Russia, to Ukraine, to the Donbass specifically. I want to talk about a lot of things with our next guest. First time we've had a conversation. I'm very much looking forward to it. Russell, Texas Bentley, joining us right now on the live link. Russell, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me on, Patrick. Pleasure to be here. I have real great respect for TNT Radio. They're real information warriors, and I'm always glad to be on with you and the other guys.
Thank you very much, Russell. And I've been following you on social media really for quite a long time, Russell. And this goes right back to when hostilities kicked off in your part of the world. You are an American living in the Donbass, and for our listeners, for our audience that are not familiar with your story, if you could, Russell, I don't want to make you compress your whole life story into a couple of minutes, but do your best. Just give us a quick kind of, summary of your story, how you ended up where you are, and how you've seen things unfold over the last 8 or so years. Go ahead, Russell.
Well, I was born in Texas in 1960, grew up in the Vietnam War, civil rights movement, all that. Always been interested in alternative politics, the other side of the story, so to speak. And when I saw what was happening in Kiev at the Maidan in early 2014, I understood that it was a coup d'etat and that America was getting ready to destroy another sovereign country, just as they had done Libya before that, Afghanistan, Iraq, Grenada, Panama, go on down the line. And so I decided that I had to do more than just hit the, sad face emoji on Facebook. And so I decided to come here in December of 2014. I arrived in Donetsk. I joined the Vostok Battalion, served on the front lines as a combat soldier with Vostok Battalion and Han Spetsnaz Battalion in 2015, and then again with the MVD, which DPR military police in 2017. And I've been living in Donetsk ever since. I now have Russian citizenship. I work as a war correspondent for Sputnik International News. I do humanitarian aid when I get the chance. I've been involved with several very excellent humanitarian aid funds here over the years, and we've brought in a lot of help for the civilians here, particularly kids, and it keeps me pretty busy. I have a Telegram channel and VK. I've been deleted and banned by Twitter and Facebook, LiveLeak, PayPal, and in 2022, just shortly after the special military operation began, I made a video on YouTube. It was a short video, only about 40 seconds, with a column of armored vehicles, Russian vehicles, and it went viral. It got a million hits like within a day, and the next day my whole YouTube channel was gone. So I've been kicked off all the Western ones. I'm still basically just on Telegram, which is basically Russian Twitter, and on VKontakte, which is basically Russian Facebook.
Yes. And I do recommend people subscribe to Russell Texas Bentley's Telegram channel. I subscribe to it as well. It's one of those sort of go-to places to get good information, good quality and up-to-date information in really what is one of the most important conflict zones right now that is really, not to exaggerate here, it's reshaping the global order, actually. And I want to talk to you, Russell, as well. You've also got is my understanding, Russell, some experience with the referendum and the elections over the last couple of years, historic transformation of what the Russian Federation called the new regions. But obviously what the people in Washington, politicians in London, in the NATO side is still considered to be Ukraine. But you, as an election observer, as a person who's been on the ground there, the elections are coming up. We've got the new round coming now. These are extremely important and crucial, really, for these regions, for the Russian Federation, I think internationally as well. What's been your experience in the past with the referendum and the elections? Just to share your experience with us.
Well, I became a citizen of the Donetsk People's Republic in 2017. In 2021, I became a citizen of the Russian Federation. And so not so much as an observer as a participant in these elections. And, I can tell you that the elections here, unlike in the United States, they're done on paper. They give you a piece of paper, you write it, you put it into a clear plexiglass box. It's much more transparent, shall we say, than what goes on in the United States. I mean, the fact is that with even before the elections, the overwhelming majority of the people here, they had a referendum in 2014 where they decided to separate from Ukraine after the neo-Nazis came to power in Kiev. And they had the referendum to join with Russia. And then they had also the presidential elections here. I mean, not for Russian president, but for DPR president, Denis Pushilin. And I mean, in all of these, of course it was, necessary to have an election, but the outcome of these elections, not at all because they were rigged, but because the so overwhelming majority of the people wanted to separate from Ukraine in 2014, wanted to join with Russia. I mean, it was a foregone conclusion. And, and so even though the elections were very transparent, there was many, many international observers here from all over the world who said the same. But, the thing is, the question here, there's maybe 10% of the people here that would disagree with joining Russia or would disagree with having separated from Ukraine back in 2014. And it's not, and of course we do have the right here to express, disagreement with Russia like that. You can't say that there's repression anywhere near on the scale of what's happening in the West.
And the reporting on these elections in Washington, you've probably seen the U.S. media coverage, Russell, over the years. I know you sort of appraise probably the U.S. media coverage and compare it to the reality on the ground. The reportage in Britain, in the U.S., is that they call them sham elections, and they say that the people are being, either browbeaten or coerced into voting. So there's this implication that, Putin or Russian authorities are making people vote a certain way, and if they don't, there'll be repercussions. That's the general, that's the general story that people get in the West constantly. But the reality on the ground is there any validity to those accusations? Just
No,
on the record
from
your experience.
Nobody's forced to vote here, to even go to vote. And of course, having done it myself, I can tell you there's no way that they can know who you voted for. You go into a little booth, you sign the piece of paper, you fold it over, and then you drop it into a plexiglass box that's got a lock on it. They can't dig through and say, oh, where did Tejas vote for, because they don't know, because there's so many in the box, it's mixed up. So there's no coercion, and there's no way that they know who to vote for. I will say that, when it comes to talking about sham elections, first of all, there's no more experts in the world than the sham elections, and the people who run the sham elections in the United States. You look at the last, 24 years of elections, and it's just ridiculous. Going all the way back. I mean, the last time I voted was in 2000. I was living in Alaska at the time. You know, I didn't vote for Bush. I voted for Ralph Nader of the Green Party. I actually worked on his campaign up there in Alaska. And, you know, I understood that that election was rigged, you know, the whole Florida Supreme Court and all that. And everyone has been rigged since then. And this last one where, you know, Biden supposedly won, I mean, all the, shall we say, nicely irregularities that came out, you know, there were, you know, videos of vans showing up at 4 o'clock in the morning with, you know, 10 more boxes, you know, of ballots, stuff like that. It's kind of hard to explain other than say it was rigged. And so, I mean, and then you talk about Britain, you know, you talk about Britain as a democracy. They have a king. You know, it's a monarchy. And, you know, it was nice that George Galloway recently got elected to the lower house of parliament in a small district. And that's cool. And George Galloway's a guy that I have a lot of respect for. But politics in the West, and especially in the United States, I hope this isn't too risque, but I call it political masturbation. Because it might feel good for a little while, but it doesn't do anything. It's a waste of time and resources, and it just leaves a mess that somebody's going to have to clean up later.
Sounds like
it's all
Chinese
fantasy, you know?
takeout food. Sounds like Chinese takeout food as well. Russell, so you mentioned 2000 election. I want to ask you this. So simple compare and contrast. That was the Florida controversy, Al Gore versus George Bush. You remember it well, the pregnant Chads. And what happened after that, Russell, was because of the controversy, there was a big push for electronic voting because of the Florida controversy, okay? And a lot of people thought that was rigged. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that it very well may have been. But what do you think about the over-reliance on electronic systems? And what are the methods? You mentioned they still use paper ballots in some of the Donbass elections and regions. And what's your opinion on, you know, electronic voting versus traditional paper ballots, the counting process? Your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, electronic voting machines are the easiest way to rig an election that there is. The easiest way, because, I mean, these Diebold machines have been proven. You know, how many times have electronic engineers from some college come in and gotten one of those machines and said, hey, look, I can switch all the votes from one guy to the other guy in 5 minutes with a smartphone. And that's really the fact. And I mean, it's like with information, you know, people get their information off the internet now. The information's slowly, just like with the search machines, just like with everything, it's being digitized. And by that, it can be changed unnoticeably and permanently. I mean, people, if they want to get real information, they have to go to a library, and they, you know, if they want to know about history or something, and you have to get a book that's written on paper. If you go to the library and you check out a book that was written in 1940 and published in 1940, and you look at what it says on the page, there's no way that some guy can come in with a pen and mark that line out and say, you know, Wendell Willkie won the election or something like that. But with digital information, you look at how many times Wikipedia articles get edited, you know, and you don't have to do it a lot. You don't have to say the sun rises in the west. You just change it by a few degrees at a time, and pretty soon the sun does rise in the west. So digital voting is it's a smoking gun of election fraud. Just to have it at all means the elections are crooked.
So, and also, I want to get your thoughts on, and I tend to personally agree with you, Russell. I'm more of a sort of old school traditionalist when it comes to voting. I believe that you have to have a lot of people involved, and just the fact that you have a lot of people in the community involved in the counting and the reporting, that it's harder to sort of fix it or to do subterfuge. But if it's done with a few software programmers and the whole system is opaque, it is ripe for abuse. I think you're absolutely correct on that, Russell. But just on the elections in Donbass, especially in Donetsk, Russell, and I know that the region you're in has been consistently targeted by Ukrainian military, artillery, HIMARS, all of these rockets, hitting civilian areas, hitting civilian areas consistently for, if I'm not mistaken, the better part of 9 years now. And even during elections, share some of your experience with that, because I know this has happened when the people are coming out to vote and then the strikes are coming in. Tell us what life is like in Donetsk on this front. I think it's important that people know and understand what the threat is for normal residents living in this area. Go ahead, Russell.
It's dangerous in Donetsk. For most of the last almost 9 years, since 2014, the center of the city was relatively safe. The districts that were closer to the front, and people have to understand that until basically the liberation of Avdiivka within the last month, the Ukrainian military front lines were on the city limits of the city of Donetsk, which is a fairly large city. It's about 1 million people, where it was before the war. There's probably 600,000 or 700,000 now. There's another small city, or the next biggest city is called Makiivka. It's basically in the same urban agglomeration with about 500,000 people. And the front lines have been the city limits. I mean, even from right now where I sit in the center of Donetsk, it's less than 10 miles to Ukrainian military positions. And heavy artillery can go 15 miles. The drones can go 12, 15 miles too. And closer to the front, it's even more dangerous. And when you have a significant occasion, like say the last few years, the biggest holiday in Russian culture, in modern Russian culture, is the Victory Day, the 9th of May, when the German Nazis signed the surrender in the Second World War. And there were years when we had big parades down the main street of Donetsk. And since the special military operation started, we don't have them at all, because they would be targeted. Absolutely. There was a female artillery commander a couple of years ago in 2022. She was killed at the front in combat, and they had a funeral for her at the Donetsk Opera Theater, which is the same place where they had the funeral for Alexander Zaharchenko, for Givy, for Motorola. And this woman whose call sign was Corsa was having her funeral there, and they bombed it. They bombed the artillery, the opera theater. They bombed the central area. And so we can't, we expect that there's going to be it's going to be dangerous to go vote when the election, when the voting days come up here. It's going to be dangerous. It's dangerous to go outside. In particular, again, I say in the frontline areas, but even in the center of the city, they tried to bomb the HIMARS, which HIMARS are operated by NATO soldiers, probably Americans. They're not operated by Ukrainians. And less than 2 weeks ago, a HIMARS rocket was shot at our main central library in the center of Donetsk, and it missed by about 2 meters. And it was, you really have to believe in guardian angels and the hand of God, because it was a penetrator round. It was set to go through the roof. And, the main library is like 3 stories tall. It's about 100 years old. It's, shall we say, massive architecture, really regal, a beautiful building, historic building, millions of books. And this thing was intending to hit the library, go through the first and second floor, and then blow up and burn the books and destroy the building. It missed. It hit the street. There was people at a bus stop just a few yards away. There's people driving by just a few yards away. But since it was set to penetrate, it blew up underground, and the shrapnel didn't slaughter all the people standing around. It was very lucky that it didn't hit the building and it didn't kill a bunch of people.
So even the act of, going to the library or, going out to vote on polling day, potentially some residents would be taking, their life into their own hands by just doing what most people would take for granted, Russell, in other parts of the world as their civic duty, as their day-to-day activity. All of these things become risky in an environment. And this is targeting civilian areas indiscriminately, consistently over, as you say, better part of 9 years. This is a war crime.
Not even indiscriminately. Right now we live in the center of the city in an apartment because our house in Petrovsky is under constant shelling. Our house has not been hit directly, but it's been damaged 3 times from artillery shells that have landed within 100 yards. Now, we've had neighbors killed on the next street over, and basically shells have hit in every direction around our house. So when I go to Petrovsky to check on the house, feed the cat, check on the neighbors, my wife stays here in the center. And when I go out the door, we say a prayer, she kisses me goodbye like it might. I take my credit card, my bank card out of my wallet and give it to her in case I don't come back. But when I go to Petrovsky, sometimes when I'm driving back from the front line districts, I get up on a hill and I can see pillars of smoke coming from the center. So, I kiss her goodbye, hoping that I'll see her again, just the same as she does me. So it's really, and it's not indiscriminate. They hit less than a month ago, or maybe a little bit more than a month ago. I think it was the end of January. They hit an open air market, textile chick market, that's like between Petrovsky and the center of the city. And I was in Petrovsky that day. I heard that it got hit. It was complete civilian area. It was a Sunday afternoon, and they shot at it with artillery from 3 different positions. Multiple rounds from 3 different positions came in, killed 25 civilians. Killed 25 civilians in a minute. And these were just people. There was a guy there that, he was a beekeeper or something. He's got a little table on the sidewalk selling honey. And there's the honey, and he's dead, laying right there. Little old ladies, a girl. I had some shoes in a shoe shop, and the girl in that shoe shop was killed. And some shoes were getting repaired, and I dropped them off, and this girl was killed before I went back to pick them up. And so it's not indiscriminate. It's intentionally targeting civilians, kind of like, should I say, exactly like what we see in Gaza.
Yep, and also I have some point of reference in that I was in Syria in 2017, and the so-called moderate rebels using anything from Grad rockets to crude sort of projectiles, explosive bullets, explosive rounds. So literally the people living in those residential areas are constantly in terror, not knowing what's coming, when it's coming, what it's going to hit, and it has a psychological effect on people over a long period of time. And it's just designed to disrupt normal life constantly, and ultimately to drive people away. But it sounds like the people are quite determined to fight through this phase right now. So that brings us to this question, Russell, as we're going to wrap up the segment in a minute. But what is the outlook right now from your point of view for Donbass? Do you see some potential improvement in the situation? Are there any key developments? You mentioned one of those earlier in the segment, but just before we wrap up, Russell, and I appreciate you joining us, how are you seeing things unfold in the coming months or the rest of this year? Go ahead, Russell.
Well, as far as being within range of artillery and drones, we are making an improvement. Russian forces are liberating and more territory. They're pushing the Nazis, which is literally what they are, Ukrainian and NATO, pushing them further back, closer to a point where they won't be able to bomb the cities, the main cities, with artillery at least. And that's a good thing. That's what we've been waiting for all these years. On the other hand, there's now a NATO's so-called exercise Steadfast Defender. NATO has brought 90,000 troops into Eastern Europe. They're in Romania, they're in the Baltics, they're in Poland, they're in Germany. And there's talk that they're going to say, okay, we're going to bring in NATO peacekeepers. And we're not going to fight in Donbass. NATO's not going to fight in Donbass, but they're going to defend Kiev and defend Odessa and maybe set up a defensive line on the Dnieper River. And the thing about that is, once they set up those defensive positions, that frees up 90,000 Ukrainian soldiers that were defending those positions to come make another attack on Donbass and make another offensive. You know, the talk about the F-16s, all that stuff, this intercepted German phone call made it clear, you know, primary source, that NATO troops are already working here. So there's a real danger that the war can escalate beyond just Russian NATO special military operation to a direct confrontation between NATO and the Russian Federation. So while we are making progress, I think this war is still a long way from over, and it's still a very, very dangerous situation, not just for people in Donbass, but also for people in Europe and all over the world.
No, I agree with you that based on the reports that we've seen, Russell, I think you're spot on in your assessment. The huge risk still on the table with the situation, and it can get a lot worse. It can expand. It's a very, very tense and a very, very difficult time. We really appreciate you joining us, Russell Texas Bentley, and do subscribe to his Telegram channel and follow him on any of the channels that you can find. Before we go, just give a shout out to your channels, to your venues and social media again, Russell.
Okay, yeah, I'm on VContact, Russell Bentley. You can find me there on Telegram. My channel is called TX DPR, the @ sign, then TX DPR in capitals. On Telegram, you have to watch out. There's a lot of problems with fake channels that come up. Mine has about 17,000 subscribers. So if you find one with that many subscribers, it'll be me. Telegram is a really good place. It's excellent for communication. It's excellent for getting news. The censorship there is non-existent. And I'll see you there.
Russell Texas Bentley, thank you for joining us on TNT this week. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Patrick. Let's do it again sometime.
100%. Stay safe, Russell. We'll keep a line of contact open with you as well. Appreciate you. We're going to take a break right now with the network with TNT. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. Stay with us. We'll be back on the other side with Basil Valentine.
Speaking on the issues that impact. This is the Patrick Henningsen Show